And no one's proved anything, right? That was the biggest piece here. I go, just because if there's a claim, like their terms of service just say, if there's a claim of streaming fraud, or, there's other stuff too. If there's a claim for copyright infringement or trademark infringement or anything, if even a claim happens, we can take your royalties and we can even give it to third parties. Now,
this is the Top Music Attorney. Y'all can go check out and follow her on YouTube. She's got a lot of great videos where she's talking about the legal side of music and some of the things that are going on in music news. We recently covered her situation that she had between her and her client in TuneCore, where TuneCore wasn't paying her client, and she exposed a lot of the things TuneCore had in their terms and conditions that really go against some of the norm when it comes to distributors, and in some cases may be illegal. So she gave a little bit of a recap, just kind of showing what was happening with her client, the email and messages that she was sending to TuneCore on behalf of her client. And now she's at a place to where TuneCore finally responded to the legal documents and information that she sent to them. So listen to this video. Let me know what y'all think in the comments in the chat too.
So anyway, after they had these big conversations, we got a response. And I'm going to show you that response. And as always, as you guys saw from the prior things that I've shown you, I have redacted sensitive information, but just so you can just see everything's super legit. So the email came from someone at TuneCore in the legal department, and then was sent to me. Hello, Crystal. Before addressing the contents of your letter and the draft of your complaint you sent, I want to put in writing the statistical data we have gathered with respect to your client's numerous TuneCore accounts. So there was more than one account, and part of our whole kind of discussion throughout this had been with respect to this data that you're talking about, you still haven't shown us anything. So what was important here is they go, okay, we're putting it in writing. I'm like, finally, they're going to show us like screenshots, give us some kind of information. Great.
Yeah, and TuneCore is not the only distributor that artists are having issues with in the case of their music getting taken down and them not being shown any proof at all of why their music was taken down, if it's fraudulent streams, how many fraudulent streams there were, how they were able to track that. And we're just at a really weird place in music distribution. Anyway, she continues.
The accounts, here's the additional information that we recently were provided by our DSP partners, so the digital service provider partners. First, as I mentioned to you and your associate during our phone calls, there's significant evidence of streaming manipulation by your client in connection with his accounts. Digital streaming generally align with the market share of the particular DSPs in which the territory that it's in and the recordings are available. So he goes on to say, basically, for example, so if a DSP like Spotify has a 30% market share of the digital distribution market, you can expect approximately 30% of the streams to come from that DSP. So similarly, with respect to territories, streams align, the percentage of the share should just be, basically equal amount to the worldwide market. I don't have a problem with any of this. Okie dokie. While they're
the weird thing about that to me though is if you're promoting, say you're promoting on Deezer. Let's just use Deezer for example, because they're just absolutely terrible. Say you're using Deezer and you spend money and energy promoting and pushing towards Deezer. It sounds like that TuneCore is saying if they see some irregularity there and they're not gonna do any research into why there's any irregularity, they're just gonna say, oh well, it looks like there's some fake streams going on, so we're gonna either flag this or take the music down, which is just doesn't make any sense if you're going to base it on market share, because there's so many opportunities for you to get more streams on a certain platform depending on how you're promoting your music.
May be variations for accounts with very few streams. As artists generate more and more streams, their streaming patterns get closer and closer to these market shares. Using Amazon Music as an example, note that during the third quarter of 2023, Amazon Music had a market share of approximately 11.1%. Okay, we're making a little note about that. While other sources may vary slightly, if streams were legitimate, one would expect stream patterns to be closely matched to the market shares as as that pertains to your client. So he went on to write out information, which I've redacted again because, it's this client's private information, but he basically was challenging. He said, we have more than normal. And that's what it was. And he's like, for this, for this one, it's this percentage. If it's this one, it's this percentage. Okay.
That's such a dumb argument. Just because you're getting more streams on a certain song, they're saying that it has to be fraudulent. I don't get it, man.
My problem once again with this is that you were just saying something. We have provided actual evidence, real screenshots from real accounts showing real stuff. And for a distributor just to say, we're not going to provide you anything and we're just going to say something in an email, I have a problem with that. That's not how it works. That definitely is not how it works when we actually get into litigation. I am a litigation attorney. And when you get into real litigation, the parties, both sides, have to show their stuff. It is required. And if you don't, to prove your case, to prove your position, you can get sanctioned by the court. So, in pre-litigation efforts, which is what this is, they don't have to disclose anything, right? We can't force them. It's troubling to me that they're going to make the threats that we're about to go through and read, and they still haven't provided anything other than words in an email. In addition to the data, which was communicated to you and or your associate during our calls, and in further response to your request, our team reached out to Amazon. All right, so they've reached out to one DSP. All right, wow. Who provided us with the following analysis
Who's listening to music on Amazon
from your client's account. Okay, so they copied and pasted, allegedly copy and pasted what this is. We can take this as true. I don't know that it's true. Who is this from? Where is the email? Where is the date to legitimize this? But let's go ahead and read it. What do they say? Quote, yes.
Well, I don't think they would have to legitimize this unless it went to court. Just saying, because this really is, at this point, is he said, she said, on both sides, on TuneCore's side and on the top music attorney and their client side. So
where is the
even
date
if they have
to
proof.
legitimize this? But let's go ahead and read it. What do they say? Quote, yes, confirmed streams from these tracks were deemed stream fraud. Looking back a year, okay, so apparently this was recent, right? Looking back a year. Why are you looking back a year? The original takedowns were in 2020 and 2021. Looking back a year.
It's taking forever.
Most of the stream fraud in February and March of 2023. What? And since then, there are insignificant total streams for these tracks. Some high-level insights observed are high volume streaming across a very small customer base. Most of the tracks were listened to by one customer. For example, this track had these many streams in February on February 15th. What? By, and it just the average of these streams and the customers per day, it just isn't humanly possible if the customer listened to the full song. Thus, as a result.
Interesting. So I wonder if this saying that it looks like this is saying that one person was streaming the song and driving up the streams. If I read that right, let me go back and see. It says, yes, can confirm. This is TuneCore contacting Amazon. It says, yes, can confirm streams from these tracks were deemed stream fraud. Looking back a year, we found most of the stream fraud in February and March 2023. Since then, there are insignificant total streams from these tracks. Some high-level insights observed are high volume streaming across very small customer base. Okay. Most of the tracks were listened to by one customer. Oh. But again, there's really no proof of that, right? We haven't seen the proof, but that's still interesting that they're saying that mainly one person streamed all the music. They also I don't know. Again, I haven't seen this whole video, so I don't know if they go to quantify it later on, but I think they show it here. But what if it's just 50 times? Like, we don't know the number. Now, this looks like it might be a 3-digit number or possibly a 4-digit number. But if one person streamed it 100 times over how much time? How much amount of time, though, is the question I would have. I don't know. This all seems kind of weird. Let's rewind it.
Customers per day, it just isn't humanly possible if the customer listened to the full song. Thus, as a result of the aforementioned statistical data and the information provided by no less than 2 major DSPs, there's no rational explanation for the streaming patterns of your clients' accounts other than streaming manipulation. So it gets better. All right, we're not done with this. But I just do, I want to highlight again, the lack of providing actual evidence, the lack of even providing a screenshot of this alleged email that they got from Amazon, but even like what's in it. Substantively, I go, okie dokie, so the takedowns happened,
well, they don't have to provide
the royalties that we're seeking from 2020 and 2021, and then you're like, it looks like he hasn't gotten any streams in the last year. Well, no kidding. He got blocked out of his accounts, and as far as I understand, the music is no longer available as of many years. So you're right, wow. and to the extent there's any earnings, I'm like, okay. So it's tough for me as the attorney on this side, for all these reasons, for this to be the response. And we're not done, so let's go back now.
Yeah, so this is interesting because one thing for you guys to know, a lot of these platforms, most platforms can take your stuff down without any notice. Unfortunately, that's just the way it is. They could take it down without any reason, without any notice. I mean, you've seen so many stories of even YouTube videos getting taken down or flagged for whatever reason. You can try and dispute it. But even the thing that's interesting with YouTube, when you try and dispute something, if you dispute a YouTube video claim or takedown in a certain way, and your dispute doesn't get approved, it gets rejected, then you have a possibility of your entire channel being taken down. So these platforms are just weird when it comes to taking down content. And I think the main reason is just because there's just so much content out there. It's hard for them to manage all the content that's on their own platforms. Here we go.
On this side, for all these reasons, for this to be the response. And we're not done, so let's go back. Now, to address the content of your letter and your assertion of the exhaustive evidence affirming your client's status as a legitimate artist. Because if you guys remember, I went through the letter that I wrote and I said, we provided exhaustive evidence affirming our client's status as a legitimate artist, right? And so all the stuff that I showed you guys that we had provided to them, right? Which somehow was supposed to make a difference and get, the royalties released. The content of your client's music and the effort involved in its creation or lack thereof. The content of your client's music and the effort involved.
Shots fired.
He's even they're even being insulting in their email. Is one factor in our determination that the client was engaged in streaming fraud based on the overwhelming factual evidence available to us. The overwhelming factual evidence available to us. Wow, it would be so cool if it could be available to everyone. I'm just saying. This further is evidence show you that. Of streaming manipulation. Again, to the whole just taking them at face value and the prove he's a legitimate artist. Okie dokie, here's the proof. Well, that doesn't matter because he committed streaming fraud. And then what I've said numerous times, and I go to villainize artists who engage or have ever engaged, apparently years ago, right? Have ever engaged in streaming fraud because they were trying to legitimize what they were doing, which is how I take it. I'm like, an artist just wants to release something and be like, hey, 5,000 people listen to it. I'm not a loser and I'm not a failure. It's not good. I'm always going to tell you guys, don't do it. You're destroying your algorithm. It only hurts you. But I understand why people do this.
That's true.
A part of this fight is not for one way or another on streaming manipulation, but the fight here is in regards to a middleman who's going to take royalties because of terms of service, which my understanding of New York law, my interpretation of all, everything that I've read is that they can't. And I think that if they were challenged on this, in an actual lawsuit, they would lose on this. All right, but anyway, we're not done. And
the interesting thing about this too is that you're gonna have to fight so hard for these DSPs, these distributors, to show you how they figure out all this information, how they figure out what a fake stream is. Because if they give you more insight into that, then there's gonna be more people who are going to use that information to bypass and fly under the radar of the system. So I think this is why there's so much pushback across all distributors, that they don't want to give that much information out. And even Spotify with the whole threshold situation. Well, I guess it was more distributors with that threshold. But Spotify with the threshold situation, they're not going to show and not going to tell you how you can figure out when you hit that threshold, how you're hitting that threshold, where all that information is coming from, because that's going to give you a peek into how you could possibly maybe rig the system. This is going to be a tough fight. Well, let's keep listening.
Content of your client's music and the effort involved or lack thereof. They just really want to say what a terrible human our client is and what a terrible artist he is. It's just shocking to me. Ever dream of getting your music into TV, film, and games? Well, it's easier than you think. And
this has some music in it. Hold on a second. I gotta skip through this because I don't want to get a flag.
Music live. Go to time. This is evidence of streaming manipulation. I would also like to point out that while gathering and compiling the above information, I was alerted to the fact that you have been using this matter to generate content for your YouTube channel and social media. Well, yeah, you were alerted because I said so in my letter. It appears that rather than working with us to understand the facts of this matter and whether, in fact, there were fraudulent business practices involved, you instead chose to use our conversations to paint a deliberately misleading and highly distorted version of the facts to your internet audience.
Oh, man. That's tough. They're getting mad because she made a YouTube video. That's wild, man. And she's actually the top music attorney has made several videos on this. I think maybe 4 or 5 total. I've only watched the one that we covered and this one, but y'all make sure you go check her out too, because this video will be linked in this video, and I can drop it in the comments as well.
It was highly alarming to find an attorney who placed her own online presence over the best interests of her client, particularly when the facts dictate that your client is stealing money from legitimate musicians with legal streaming activity. I place the interests of my client first and foremost above anything else. And the fact that this is happening,
as a lawyer,
and the fact that this is not only happening to my client, but apparently to a lot of artists, to a lot of music producers out there. That's why I brought this matter to my internet audience, particularly when the facts dictate that your client is stealing money from legitimate musicians with legal streaming activity. Going back to my analogy in that first video, which is how the dirty cops, they're enforcing the law, and then they go and just pocket the money themselves. Maybe not an exact one-to-one, but just in the same kind of, if my understanding and interpretation of the law is that what you are doing are penalizing and enforcing impermissible penalties to artists because you're like, hey, you broke the rules on Spotify, and no one's proved anything, right? That was the biggest piece here. I go, just because if there's a claim, like their terms of service just say, if there's a claim of streaming fraud, or, you know, there's other stuff too. If there's a claim for copyright infringement or trademark infringement or anything, if even a claim happens, we can take your royalties and we can even give it to third parties. Now, my...
Oh, no. Yeah, that's crazy. We covered this in the last video, but it's kind of like if you were accused of certain things and it was made public, even if the claims weren't true, you could possibly, your job could be in jeopardy. Your relationships could be in jeopardy. It's interesting how similar this kind of is to our current, I wouldn't say legal system, but social system, because there's a lot even going on in the news today to where someone's being portrayed a certain way in the public eye, and there might not be any evidence. There might not be any arrests. There might not be any things actually going against them, but the court of public opinion is tough to beat.
Whoa, that doesn't sound right. So then when you say that my client is stealing money from legitimate musicians, what are you talking about?
Dang.
His royalties that he had earned, of which you took, but he's a thief? I'm just curious. In this regard, and with respect to the draft complaint, right, because we added a complaint with our letter, and your threats of filing a complaint against TuneCore, please be advised that we take this matter very seriously and will defend any lawsuit vigorously to the full extent of the law, including, if needed, filing counterclaims against our client for fraud, as well as seeking attorney's fees and costs. As you are likely aware, counterclaims can result in legal sanctions and penalties for the party filing a frivolous lawsuit. You know, they're right. You can get into trouble for filing a frivolous lawsuit where you do not have...
It's going to be expensive to fight that, too. You haven't done
proper research and just things like that. That is not what this is. Our client absolutely has a legitimate claim. And in fact, one of the biggest problems that I've taken is that I go, if we're going to point to New York law, which is what controls the terms of service, right, for TuneCore, and we go, well, New York law says that if you just take tens of thousands of dollars of someone else's royalties and they don't actually account for damages that you've suffered, that's an impermissible penalty, and you can't do it. So I had said, there's that. TuneCore, what do you think? And the response was literally, this is an ethical issue. Ethically, we will not release the funds. And in fact, they even offered, and I'm not making this up, and they even offered and they said, we'll give the funds to a charity of your client's choosing, but we will not give them to him because he's a fraudster. So my issue...
Wow, y'all, this is insane. And the thing you have to think about with this whole situation, and hopefully this doesn't become a trend, it's starting to look like it may become a trend, but it's going to cost an operation like TuneCore little to nothing to fight this, or to countersue, or to go after the top music attorney or her client. Then you get into hot water, you rack up legal bills, it wastes your time. It's a tough situation to be in, because basically TuneCore has the leverage at this point. I mean, unless you're a multimillionaire and you just have a lot of disposable income, if they go on to continue this class action lawsuit, file the lawsuit, and they start to fight it, it's going to cost a lot of time and a lot of money. And TuneCore is just going to be sitting back like, all right, bring it on. Let's go. We're still not going to pay you based on principle. So this is what happens in a lot of cases where you see people end up settling or they'll fold. But it sounds like TuneCore is not going to, they're not going to fold on this situation. And it's going to have to go pretty far and become a lot bigger case before they let just one person and their attorney kind of push them off their square.